Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's true story is about the corporate freeloader who thought she was untouchable. I decided to host a simple dinner party, and the one person who always dodges the bill showed up, expecting a free meal. What she didn't know is that I had a master plan years in the making. Settle in, because this is the story of how Eliza finally exposed the office manipulator. During a social dinner, I arranged with several colleagues. The person notorious for never settling their share appeared for the gathering, unaware that I was ready for her. My name is Eliza, and I need to share this account. I am 29 years old. I work as a content strategist at a publishing house, and have been there for 2 years. Until recently, I was one of those people who adamantly avoids confrontation. You know, the type who would rather silently endure frustration than risk causing a stir. That was my personality. However, certain circumstances in life necessitate shedding that facade of endless politeness and revealing your true resilience. It all began when Brenda joined our division. She was 32, had flawless dark hair, was perpetually fashionable, and exuded a self-confidence that I admittedly used to admire. On her first day, I recall thinking, what a polished professional. If only I'd foreseen the trouble ahead. The initial indicators were subtle. During the introductory lunch we organised, when the server presented the check and everyone started tallying their individual amounts, Brenda suddenly became intensely occupied with her phone. "Oh, guys, my sincere apologies. It's my father calling with a major crisis," she announced, hurrying away from the table. "Could you please cover my portion? I'll transfer the funds immediately." Naturally, the transfer never materialised. The following week, during an after-work gathering, the exact same scenario played out. Brenda ordered 3 expensive craft beers, disappeared to the restroom when it was time for payment, and returned claiming her debit card was experiencing a system error. Max, who was always excessively accommodating, ended up covering her entire tab. I observed these incidents with a complex mix of amazement and respect for her sheer nerve. How did anyone manage this behaviour without experiencing even a flicker of embarrassment? Most remarkably, she executed it with such casual assurance that you almost believed it was just unfortunate timing. The pattern became routine over several months. Brenda always conjured up an imaginative excuse when the time came to pay. I left my wallet in the locker, my banking app crashed, I just received an urgent notification, and always delivered with that earnest expression, convincing you it was genuinely misfortune's fault. Meanwhile, I noted she drove a new Mercedes SUV, carried handbags that cost more than my full monthly salary, and routinely had her nails done at upscale salons near the office district. Her workstation was habitually littered with shopping bags from boutique stores I only knew by name. During casual group lunches, she would inevitably claim to forget her purse or receive an emergency call precisely when the bill arrived. At evening happy hours, she consistently ordered the most extravagant cocktails, yet somehow needed to rush out moments before settling the account. Always with a solemn promise to pay later, a promise never honoured. After 6 months of monitoring this behaviour, I began to realise it wasn't a series of unfortunate events or mere bad luck. It was a calculated, well-rehearsed strategy. Brenda had perfected the skill of exploiting her co-workers' good nature, consistently leveraging our inherent politeness and collective aversion to conflict. The most frustrating part was that she didn't appear to be facing any real financial strain. Quite the opposite. She routinely boasted about a lavish lifestyle most of us could only dream of. It was obvious she simply preferred not to pay when she could effortlessly get others to cover her expenses. I began silently compiling a record of every incident, every flimsy alibi, and every broken commitment, completely unaware that I would soon have the perfect chance to use this documentation. The truth is, I was starting to feel foolish for letting this behaviour persist. Not just when it happened to me, but seeing her treat genuinely good people like Max, who works 2 jobs to support his elderly grandmother, or Chloe, who had recently moved and was striving to establish herself in the city. One afternoon, during another group lunch, I watched Brenda execute her standard performance. This time, she had ordered the priciest item on the menu, a specialised tuna steak for $55, while the rest of us stuck to more affordable selections. When payment was due, she suddenly received an urgent call from her doctor and had to depart immediately. "Team, I am so sorry. My specialist just informed me my slipped disc is causing inflammation and I need to come in right away, she declared dramatically, already clutching her designer clutch. Could you handle my share? I absolutely promised to wire the money this afternoon. Unsurprisingly, she failed to transfer the funds. Worse, the following Monday, she was sporting a new, expensive hairstyle and colour that clearly exceeded $350. When someone complimented it, she responded casually, "Oh, I visited my regular stylist this weekend. I also took the opportunity for a keratin treatment, brow shaping, and a manicure. Self-care is a crucial investment, right?" It was then that I definitively understood this wasn't about money for true emergencies. It was strictly a matter of priorities. For Brenda, maintaining her appearance was a non-negotiable expense, but contributing her share to social outings with colleagues was entirely optional, knowing there was always someone willing to bail her out. The ultimate tipping point arrived on a Tuesday in November that remains vivid in my memory. It was Chloe's birthday, our 26-year-old web designer. Chloe is one of those intrinsically sweet individuals who had moved from Idaho a few months prior and was still adjusting to the fast-paced life of a big city. To celebrate, she brought in a platter of her grandmother's famous shortbread cookies. "It's a cherished family recipe," she explained proudly, revealing the tray in the staff kitchen. "They use premium imported butter and pecans that my grandmother sends directly from Idaho. She always baked them for me on my birthdays as a child." You could see the heartfelt significance of the gesture and the care she took, waking up at 5 a.m. to bake something unique to share. The tray held 12 perfectly formed cookies, each adorned with a whole pecan on top. Chloe had even included a small, handwritten note. "Thanks for making my first year here so special." Brenda arrived late that day. Predictably, upon seeing the cookies in the break room, she proceeded to devour half the entire platter before other co-workers even had a chance to try them. I was pouring coffee when I witnessed the scene. She was eating them one after another, acting as if they were her personal snack, without even pausing to read Chloe's card. When Chloe entered the room to invite everyone and saw that only 4 cookies remained for a team of 15 people, her face visibly crumbled. "Brenda," she said gently, trying hard to maintain her composure. "I had made those for everyone to enjoy. They were intended for us to celebrate together." Brenda's response left me utterly stunned, marking the moment I realised she wasn't merely opportunistic, but genuinely malicious. "Oh, my bad, but they were actually kind of stale anyway," she commented, theatrically licking the remnants from her fingers. "You really should find a better recipe next time. Maybe less baking soda. And this butter tastes like one of those cheap supermarket brands." I watched tears welling up in Chloe's eyes. She had used over $120 worth of high-quality ingredients, had gotten up in the middle of the night to prepare this thoughtful treat, and had now been publicly humiliated. Other colleagues began entering the room just then, making the situation even more mortifying when they realised what had transpired. "Wow, Chloe, these look fantastic," said Victor, trying to grab one of the remaining few. "Did you bake these yourself?" "Yes," Chloe responded, her voice thick with emotion. "But I think they didn't turn out very well." It was at that instant that something inside me irreversibly changed. This was no longer about money or restaurant checks. It was about fundamental respect, common human decency, and shielding decent people from exploiters like Brenda. She had crossed a boundary I hadn't even known existed until I witnessed it being breached so cruelly and needlessly. A week following the cookie incident, Brenda's behaviour sank to a new low of audacity I didn't believe was possible. We had collectively agreed to order Mediterranean takeout for an office lunch. It was a Friday and everyone was eager to unwind a bit after a demanding week. Max had carefully selected a gourmet gyro platter with premium spiced lamb and fresh yogurt sauce, the most expensive choice on the menu, costing nearly $45. For Max, who was always very frugal, this represented a rare, small indulgence. I remember him mentioning, "I only treat myself to this once a month." When the food delivery arrived, Max was on a critical call with a key client from the East Coast. It was a negotiation he had been working on for 3 weeks to secure a 6-month retainer, so he couldn't abruptly end the conversation. He made a hand gesture to the group, indicating he'd be quick, and left his lunch container on the kitchen island alongside the others. Brenda saw his gyro platter on the counter and, without any ceremony, picked it up, poured some of it on top, and proceeded to eat it like a pro. Chloe, and started eating it. It wasn't an accidental error. She looked around, saw that no one was paying attention, and brazenly appropriated the most expensive meal ordered. When Max finally managed to conclude his call 15 minutes later and returned to retrieve his lunch, he found only the empty container discarded in the trash. "Brenda, that was my gyro platter," he said, still trying to process the violation, pointing to the container she had thrown away. "Oh, I thought it was mine," she replied without pausing her chewing, acting as if this were the most normal thing in the world. It must have been a simple misunderstanding. "But you didn't order a gyro platter," Max insisted, visibly struggling to remain calm. "You ordered a vegetable salad. It's right there on the counter with your name clearly marked on the container." Brenda shrugged with an unnerving indifference. "Well, I've already consumed it now. There's no undoing it. Besides, that lamb was actually quite bland. You should submit a complaint to the restaurant." Max, who is typically the most patient person imaginable, completely snapped. His voice escalated several tones. "You cannot simply steal other people's food. This is utterly unbelievable. I was looking forward to this meal all week." "Wow, how incredibly rude," Brenda replied, feigning shock and placing a dramatic hand over her chest. "You don't need to yell at me over a small misunderstanding. Why are you so aggressive? Honestly, Max, I assumed you were more mature than this." She stormed out of the office, acting indignant, leaving Max without lunch, without money to order a replacement since he had spent all his funds on the platter she devoured, and worst of all, being portrayed as the villain of the story. It was the most masterful performance of psychological manipulation I had ever witnessed. In mere seconds, she transformed Max from the wronged victim into the unwarranted aggressor, and successfully left the scene as the deeply offended party. That night driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about the entire sequence of our events. Chloe humiliated, Max exploited and then designated as the villain, and me always silently observing, always avoiding confrontation, always being the overly polite person who doesn't want to cause trouble. But primarily, I couldn't get Max's devastated expression out of my mind when he realised his lunch was gone. He had worked all morning without eating, anticipating that gyro platter. And the way Brenda managed to make him feel guilty for being upset about his own loss was diabolical. I arrived home with a firm resolution. My boyfriend Ryan works as a head chef at an upscale European fusion restaurant downtown, and I knew exactly how to leverage this connection to my advantage. It was time for Brenda to encounter a version of Eliza she hadn't seen yet, the version that refuses to be taken advantage of or to stand by while good people are exploited. I called Ryan that same evening. "Honey, I urgently need a huge favour. Do your people still offer discounts for corporate groups?" When he confirmed they did, I smiled for the first time in weeks. I finally had a plan that could work. The next morning, I sent an email to 8 key people in the office, deliberately including Brenda. "Hey team, how about we organise a group dinner this Friday? I found an amazing restaurant that gives excellent group discounts. It's at the Apex Grill at 7 p.m. The discount is my treat." When a few closer friends discreetly cautioned me about adding Brenda to the list, I just offered a cryptic smile. "Trust me," I replied. "This time things will be very different." I chose the Apex Grill strategically. It wasn't just because of my connection with Ryan, but because of the perfect logistical setup for my plan. The restaurant is situated on the 25th floor of a high-rise commercial building, accessible only by secured elevators. Once you're up there, it is virtually impossible to exit unobtrusively without everyone at the table noticing. Furthermore, the main courses ranged between $40 and $75 each. It wasn't excessively exorbitant for a sophisticated establishment, but costly enough to make any escape attempt financially significant and embarrassing. And Ryan had secured a private table for us near the rear of the restaurant, shielded from the main flow of traffic, and critically, far from any discreet emergency exit. Throughout the week, I observed Brenda at the office with a new, clinical perspective. Now that I knew precisely what to look for, I could identify every small sign of her manipulative tactics. The way she consistently positioned herself furthest from the bill at group settings. How she mysteriously needed to take vital phone calls exactly when it was time to divide expenses. The meticulously calculated timing of her emergencies. Ryan helped me meticulously plan every single detail. Are you completely certain you don't want to brief me on the full scope of this plan? He asked during the week, intrigued by my sudden organisational drive. Just trust me, I replied, and please ensure our table is as isolated as physically possible. It needs to be an impossible feat to leave without everyone observing the exit. On Thursday, Brenda even attempted to pry for more specifics about the dinner. Eliza, what style of cuisine do they serve at this place? She asked with that innocent smile I now recognised as calculated. Is it terribly expensive? I wouldn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable about the cost. The sheer irony of her concern about uncomfortable situations almost made me laugh aloud. It's European fusion, I replied casually. The prices are quite reasonable for the quality. Ryan secured an excellent corporate discount for us. You'll love it. Friday finally arrived. I spent the entire day with a nervous energy, but my resolve was absolute. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes ahead of schedule to confirm all the final arrangements with Ryan. He had reserved the exact table I requested, deep in the most remote corner, with a stunning panoramic view of the city, yet strategically positioned so that anyone leaving would be forced to walk past the entire dining area. The check will be presented precisely as you specified, Ryan assured me, and our staff is fully briefed on the situation. No one will accept excuses about card issues or banking apps being down. The group began arriving exactly at 7 p.m. First came Max and Chloe, still slightly cautious about Brenda's presence. Are you sure this is a good idea? Max whispered upon arrival. Just observe, I replied. This time things will unfold differently. Then came Susan, our chief editor, accompanied by Leo and Hannah from the sales department. Last to arrive were George and his partner Victor, who also works with us in HR. Brenda was, predictably, the final person to show up. She entered the restaurant with an air of entitlement, wearing a deep crimson gown that clearly cost more than my monthly rent and shoes. I was certain I'd seen in the Manolo Blahnik window for over $200. What an exquisite location, Eliza, she exclaimed, surveying the room with genuine approval. You truly possess impeccable taste, and what an astonishing view. It must have cost a fortune just to get this reservation. For the first 30 minutes, everything proceeded normally. We discussed work, weekend plans, and the popular new streaming series everyone was watching. Brenda was in her natural habitat, dominating the conversation with stories of her latest shopping sprees and a recent holiday trip to Tuscany. I poured an absolute fortune into wine this trip, she laughed, as if spending exorbitant amounts were commonplace. But when you discover a vintage 1998 Chianti, you simply cannot pass it up, can you? Then came the moment to place the food orders. I watched fascinated as everyone meticulously studied the menu, clearly concerned about the price points. Max chose a seared duck dish for $49. Chloe opted for a light truffle pasta for $35. Susan and the others made similar budget-conscious selections. Brenda, however, behaved as if she were at a complimentary buffet. I must have the premium chilled seafood tower, she announced without hesitation, pointing to the most expensive item in the cold appetizer section, and also the house specialty escargots as an individual appetizer. I discreetly consulted the menu. The seafood tower cost $65. The escargots were $45, and perhaps we should order a bottle of fine Prosecco for the table, she continued, signalling the waiter without consulting anyone. The highest quality one. Do you carry any Valdobbiadene selections? Before anyone could politely object, she had ordered a bottle of Prosecco that cost $90. It's on me, guys, she declared, to celebrate our camaraderie and this magnificent place Eliza found. Of course, on me meant it would be split equally among all of us, adding another $11 to everyone's individual cost. During the meal, I observed, fascinated, as Brenda executed her standard performance, but this time I was completely ready. She completely monopolised the discussion, talking non-stop about her personal life, her upcoming apartment staging plans, her ideas for her next Caribbean cruise. I'm leaning toward the Turks and Caicos next, she was saying, gesturing with chopsticks full of $65 seafood. Or perhaps the Maldives. Those luxury private resorts are simply divine, aren't they? Of course, they run about $4,000 per week, but you cannot put a price on genuine relaxation. She also completely dominated the shared dishes I had suggested for the group. We had ordered olives, calamari, and a salmon tartare appetizer to share. Brenda consumed at least half of everything herself, treating it like her personal portion. "My goodness, this calamari is exquisite," she exclaimed, taking the fourth piece in a row. "You all absolutely must try some." "Oh, wait, are they all gone? What a pity." Her brazenness was stunning. She ate as if deprived, which was richly ironic given her regular patronage of expensive restaurants. The key difference was that this time she was truly on the hook for every single item she consumed. When desserts were served and the mood had relaxed considerably, I subtly signalled the waiter that it was time for the most critical part of my plan. Ryan had fully instructed the staff on the procedure, and everything was executing perfectly. The waiter approached our table and announced, "Excuse me, everyone. The total bill comes to $620 for 8 people. That is $77,50 per person for an equal split. Would you prefer to settle by card, or will each individual be paying their portion?" It was at that precise moment that Brenda instantly rose to her feet, acting on pure conditioned reflex. "Oh, team, I am suddenly feeling terribly unwell," she declared dramatically, clutching her hand to her forehead in a gesture she had deployed dozens of times before. "I fear it might be something I consumed. It must have been that seafood tower. Sometimes raw fish just doesn't agree with my system. I just need to use the ladies' room to compose myself." She hurried away, conspicuously leaving her Prada clutch on the chair, a move designed to signal her imminent return. I waited exactly 5 minutes, timing it on my phone before taking action. "Guys, she must genuinely be ill," I said, feigning concern. "I'll just check if she's okay." With deliberate care, I opened her clutch directly in front of everyone. It was not an invasion of privacy when conducted publicly and with plausible justification. I found only essential items: expensive makeup, imported mints, Chanel perfume, and the Mercedes key fob. No physical wallet was present. "How extremely odd," I commented, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Her wallet isn't in here, perhaps she left it in her car." I discreetly palmed the keys. "I'll quickly check her car. Maybe she forgot it there." In reality, I had a very different mission planned for those keys. That evening, driving home after the most revealing dinner of my life, I couldn't stop thinking about how every single step had unfolded precisely as I anticipated. Brenda had exposed her true colours once again, but this time I was prepared. My boyfriend Ryan had questioned my certainty about the plan during the week, and now I knew the answer was an emphatic yes. It was time for Brenda to understand that some people refuse to be exploited indefinitely. What she was unaware of was that I had meticulously documented everything, not just her current behaviour, but months of her manipulative patterns. And now I possessed tangible evidence of the extravagant lifestyle she maintained at the expense of others. The rules of the game had officially changed, and for the first time in a very long time, I was firmly in control of the situation. I left the restaurant and walked briskly toward the parking structure, with Brenda's keys in hand. My heart was pounding, but I felt more resolved than ever. I was not committing any illegal act. I was merely checking if her wallet was in the car, as any solicitous co-worker would do. Brenda's silver Mercedes SUV was parked very close to the main entrance, as was her habit of arriving early to secure the best spots. I used the key fob to open the trunk, and what I discovered exceeded my wildest expectations. There were at least 6 enormous shopping bags from high-end retailers scattered inside. Bloomingdale's, Neiman Marcus, Burberry, and even a small turquoise box from Tiffany & Co. Clothes still bore their original price tags, brand new shoes were in pristine boxes, and even some jewellery packaged as gifts was visible. Working quickly, I began photographing everything with my phone, documenting every expensive item Brenda had recently purchased. A $500 designer blazer, $700 Gucci loafers, a new $900 Burberry tote bag. The sheer volume of luxury goods was obscene. But what truly shocked me were the receipts tucked inside the bags. I retrieved several and photographed them as well. The purchases had been made just that same week, staggered between Monday and Thursday. The total amount I managed to document easily exceeded $2,500 in just 4 days. One receipt in particular seized my attention. $350 spent at a high-end spa the previous Tuesday, the very day she had forgotten her wallet at lunch with the team. Another receipt showed a $600 purchase at a beauty supply store on Thursday. The same day she asked Max to pay for her drinks because her app was malfunctioning. I returned to the restaurant with overwhelming proof to confront Brenda, but she still hadn't emerged from the restroom. Another 10 minutes elapsed before she finally appeared, sporting a visibly nauseated expression that was pure theatrical performance. "My deepest apologies, everyone. I truly am feeling quite ill." She began her routine act, one hand pressed to her stomach and the other against her forehead. "I strongly suspect food poisoning. That seafood tower must have been spoiled. I urgently need to go home immediately." She inserted a dramatic pause, looking around the table with the expression of someone valiantly fighting nausea. "Could I transfer my portion tomorrow morning, or perhaps early next week? I promise I will not forget this time." It was the exact same empty promise she had been making for months. I calmly placed my phone on the table, with the screen facing upward, displaying the gallery of photos of her recent luxury purchases. "That's interesting," I said, keeping my voice smooth and perfectly controlled. "Because from what I observed in your car just now, you spent over $2,500 on shopping this week. I'm quite certain that $77.50 will not ruin your personal budget." The silence around our table was absolute. You could clearly hear the restaurant's background music and the distant chatter from other tables, but our section was completely mute. Everyone looked back and forth, at me, at the phone screen, and at Brenda. Brenda became visibly pale, but frantically attempted to maintain the charade. Her voice, however, had completely lost its theatrical confidence. Those purchases were gifts I was buying for other family members, for my sister, for my mother. I swiped the screen and displayed a specific photo of one receipt. "This $500 designer blazer is in a size 8, which is precisely your size. And this receipt confirms it was paid with your personal credit card, not marked as a gift purchase." I displayed another receipt. "And here, $350 spent at the Grand Spa last Tuesday, the same day you conveniently forgot your wallet at lunch and Max was forced to cover your meal." Brenda's expression instantly shifted from ghostly pale to burning red with intense anger. She realised she had been comprehensively cornered, with no viable escape route. "These Gucci loafers," I continued, showing one last photo, "also in your size. And this Burberry tote bag in the photo is identical to the one you were carrying yesterday at the office." With no possibility of escape and 7 colleagues staring directly at her, Brenda finally abandoned the performance. With hands trembling from sheer humiliation and fury, she grabbed her phone and opened her banking application. $77.50, she muttered through clenched teeth, typing the exact amount with such aggression that the phone shook. The transfer notification instantly appeared on my screen. For the first time in months, Brenda had actually paid her share, and she had done it in front of multiple witnesses. The rest of the dinner concluded in oppressive silence. Brenda remained seated but did not utter another word. The others spoke in hushed tones, visibly processing the astonishing scene they had just witnessed. When we finally stood up to leave, Brenda was the first to depart, ignoring everyone. She simply grabbed her bag and stormed out of the restaurant with rigid, angry strides. "Wow, Eliza," Susan whispered while we waited for the elevator. "How long have you been aware of all this?" The following Monday, Brenda launched a subtle but damaging defamation campaign. I had anticipated some form of reaction, but the speed and intensity with which she acted took me by surprise. It was clear she had spent the entire weekend meticulously planning her counter-offensive. She started early, arriving at the office before everyone else, and strategically positioning herself in the kitchen, knowing it was the main traffic point for morning coffee. When Hannah arrived, Brenda was already there with red-rimmed eyes as if she'd been weeping profusely. "Hello, Hannah," she said with a brittle voice that I immediately recognised as another performance. "Do you have a moment? I urgently need to confide in someone about what happened Friday." Throughout the morning, I watched Brenda execute the same theatrical scene with various people. For every colleague who appeared, she recounted a slightly altered version of the event, always portraying herself as the innocent victim of a spiteful and humiliating attack. Eliza publicly assaulted me. I overheard her whispering to Leo from sales. She illegally violated my personal privacy, went through my private belongings, and humiliated me in front of everyone. I have never felt such profound embarrassment in my life. For Rebecca in HR, the story featured different emotional details. I was genuinely experiencing suspected food poisoning, and yet she cruelly forced me to pay. She demonstrated zero empathy or compassion. And to Tom from marketing, she added, "The worst part is that I'm currently experiencing some very private financial hardship. My father is seriously unwell, and I have enormous medical expenses." I truly believed she would understand, but instead, I was mercilessly attacked. Brenda's narrative was expertly constructed. She interwove convincing lies with elements of truth, consistently positioning herself as the vulnerable, injured party. She framed our confrontation as an unprovoked assault by a cruel, petty individual against someone who was legitimately in need. Most impressive was her ability to modulate her voice and expressions for each person. With men, she adopted a more fragile, almost childlike tone. With women, she was more indignantly righteous, appealing to female solidarity. With supervisors, she stressed issues of professionalism and a hostile work environment. "Honestly," she told Jennifer from communications, "I thought Eliza was far more mature. I never imagined she could be so envious and petty, simply because I drive a more expensive car than hers." When Max informed me about the widespread rumours, I felt a familiar mixture of anger and a reluctant admiration for Brenda's strategic thinking. She had entirely hijacked the narrative in less than 48 hours. "Some people are actually beginning to question what truly happened on Friday," Max warned me during lunch. "She's claiming you invaded her privacy and that the whole thing was just a big misunderstanding, and that she's facing serious financial difficulties," added Chloe, who had heard the version told to Rebecca. "Like her father is ill, and she has huge medical bills to cover." I knew I had to prepare adequately for this war of narratives. Brenda had proven herself a master manipulator, and I could not afford to underestimate her capacity to spin the situation in her favour. I spent the rest of the week meticulously gathering evidence, like a detective building a case file. First, I retrieved all the screenshots of old text messages where Brenda promised to transfer funds later, but never did. I had at least 15 different conversations spanning 6 months. Then, I delved into her public social media profiles: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Her presence was public and provided a goldmine of contradictory evidence. Her posts showed a lifestyle entirely incompatible with someone facing financial hardship. There were photos of expensive trips, a weekend in Tuscany in September, a luxury getaway to Miami in August, a high-end resort in Scottsdale in July. Each trip easily cost over $2,500 based on the hotels and restaurants she tagged. The restaurant photos were particularly damning. Dinners at sophisticated venues, at least 3 times a week, always featuring expensive entrees and premium wines. In one photo from August, she was holding a bottle of Dom Perignon, champagne that retailed for over $350. The caption read, "Celebrating another project finished. Life is too short not to indulge in the little luxuries we deserve. Blessed, work hard, play hard." I also obtained detailed written testimonies from Chloe about the cookie incident and from Max about the stolen gyro platter. Both wrote explicit accounts of how they were treated, including the exact humiliating words Brenda had used. Chloe's statement was especially moving. She not only ate half of the cookies I made specifically for my birthday, but criticised them in front of my co-workers, saying they were stale and that I should use a better recipe. I'd woken up at 5 a.m. using an expensive family recipe. I felt profoundly humiliated and worthless. Max was more direct. Brenda simply stole my food and consumed it, then refused to pay for it or order a replacement. When I confronted her politely, she aggressively flipped the script and made me look like the aggressor. It was pure, unadulterated manipulation. I generated a detailed chronological list of every instance where Brenda had avoided payment, including dates, approximate amounts, and witnesses present. The list totaled 23 distinct incidents over 6 months. Through a professional contact on LinkedIn, I also uncovered information about her behaviour at her previous employer. Apparently, Brenda had used the exact same playbook at the corporate PR agency where she worked before. According to my source, she was notorious for constantly forgetting her wallet and consistently finding excuses to avoid paying her share at social functions. "She did the exact same thing there, Mike," my friend told me over the phone. always borrowing cash for lunch and never repaying it. When she left the company, she owed at least 5 different people money. By the end of the week, I had a comprehensive, airtight dossier on Brenda's behavioural pattern. It was no longer just about the dinner or the money. It was about a lifestyle fundamentally built upon the systematic exploitation of others' generosity. During the happy hour the following Friday, Brenda decided to execute her final public defence. She chose the perfect moment. End of the week, a relaxed environment, and 15 colleagues present, including several individuals who hadn't been at the dinner and had only heard her side of the story. She waited until everyone had at least one drink and the atmosphere was lively. Then, feigning a sudden impulse, she asked for everyone's complete attention. "Guys," she said, gently tapping the table to get the room quiet. "I know this isn't exactly the right time or place to discuss this, but I feel compelled to clarify some things about what transpired last week." The bar became silent as everyone turned to face her. This was precisely the audience she needed for maximum emotional impact. "I was viciously attacked and publicly humiliated by Eliza," she began, her voice trembling with seemingly genuine emotion. "In front of all of you, my colleagues and friends, and this was all over a simple misunderstanding about a restaurant bill." She paused for a strategic, dramatic effect, sweeping her gaze around the room to capture everyone's sympathy. "I was truly feeling acutely ill that night," she continued, suffering from what was clearly food poisoning. "And yet, instead of receiving kindness and understanding, I was aggressively embarrassed and attacked." Her tears appeared, completely sincere as she spoke. "What wounds me the deepest is that I am currently navigating a very serious financial hardship. My father has severe health issues, and I am shouldering immense medical expenses. I honestly thought I could count on a colleague's empathy, but instead, I was mercilessly assaulted." She deliberately left the final sentence incomplete, allowing the silence to deliver the powerful implication that she had been treated cruelly and insensitively. It was a flawless, masterful performance. She had successfully transformed a confrontation about her calculated manipulative behaviour into a heartbreaking story of bullying against a financially vulnerable person. Several people at the table seemed visibly moved, especially those who lacked the full context. I allowed her to conclude her statement entirely before I calmly stood up. My heart was pounding furiously, but my voice emerged firm and completely controlled. "Since we are now openly discussing this situation," I said, deliberately connecting my phone to the bar's projector that I had discreetly arranged for earlier, "I believe everyone deserves to view the complete factual picture. What followed was one of the most intense and revealing experiences of my entire life. I had prepared a visual presentation, which I mentally titled Brenda's Behaviour Timeline, and I was moments away from displaying 6 months of irrefutable evidence to 15 work colleagues. The first screen displayed the photos of the luxury purchases I had taken in the restaurant parking lot. These images were captured inside Brenda's car last Friday. I began, keeping my tone calm and factual. They show over $2,500 in high-end purchases made in the very same week she claimed to be enduring severe financial hardship. I then displayed each individual receipt, meticulously highlighting the dates and the amounts paid. Tuesday, $350 at the Grand Spa. Wednesday, $900 on a Burberry bag. Thursday, $600 at a beauty supply store. The second section featured screenshots of WhatsApp conversations. Here we have 15 separate conversations spanning 6 months, where Brenda explicitly promised to transfer money later and never once followed through. I read aloud some of the most damning messages. "Oh guys, my bank app is totally frozen. I'll transfer the entire amount tomorrow for sure." Or, "I swear I left my purse in the locked cabinet, but I promise I'll transfer the full amount on Monday." All of these promises were consistently broken, I continued. And simultaneously, the third section was devastating. Screenshots directly from Brenda's social media profiles, documenting her luxurious lifestyle. Photos at sophisticated restaurants, trips to 5-star resorts, and shopping bags from designer boutiques. Each image was dated and accompanied by the researched, approximate cost, based on the locations and items shown. This dinner at the French restaurant cost a minimum of £250 per person. I Arsenoi explained, showing a photo of her holding a wine bottle I had researched. It retailed for $200. This trip to Tuscany in September, based on the resort she tagged, cost her at least $2,000 for the hotel alone. The fourth section presented the testimonies from Chloe and Max. I read the full detailed account of the cookie humiliation incident and the brazenly stolen gyro platter, ensuring everyone heard precisely how Brenda had treated our colleagues. After consuming half of the specialised cookies that Chloe had meticulously baked for her birthday, Brenda said, and I quote, "They were kind of stale anyway. You should look up a better recipe." You could hear a palpable wave of whispering. Wow. And how cruel, as I read. The fifth section detailed the behavioural pattern at her previous job. Through a highly reliable source, I discovered that Brenda engaged in the exact same pattern of behaviour at the company where she worked before. Multiple individuals reported borrowing money for lunch that was never repaid, and a consistent, systematic pattern of avoiding paying her portion at all social gatherings. Finally, I displayed the complete chronological list, 23 documented incidents over 6 months, complete with dates, estimated costs and witnesses present. The presentation lasted 10 minutes, and the silence in the bar was absolute. All her claims of financial hardship were incontrovertibly contradicted by overwhelming visual evidence of extravagant spending. Every single one of her fabricated stories of misunderstanding was now contextualized within a clear, systematic, and well-established pattern of exploitation. When I finished, I looked directly at Brenda. She was white as a sheet, unable to utter a single word to refute such concrete and comprehensive evidence. "This is the documentation I've compiled," I concluded simply. "Each person here can now draw their own informed conclusions." Confronted with irrefutable facts in the presence of 15 witnesses, Brenda had no way left to maintain her victim narrative. There was no conceivable excuse to explain how someone supposedly in financial distress could spend thousands of dollars on luxuries while systematically exploiting work colleagues for petty amounts. The group's reaction was immediate and entirely unanimous. There was no need for discussion or debate. The evidence spoke for itself. Susan, our manager, was the first to speak. "Brenda," she said in a tone I had never heard her use before, "this behaviour is absolutely unacceptable. This conduct stops here, right now." Victor, who had been one of the most initially sympathetic to Brenda's victim story, shook his head in patent disbelief. "I cannot believe you manipulated all of us in this manner." Brenda attempted one last, desperate defence. "You people don't understand," she began, but her voice had lost all theatrical conviction. "Things are not as straightforward as they appear." "What isn't straightforward?" interrupted Jennifer. "Spending $900 on a bag and then claiming you can't afford $77 for dinner. Or publicly humiliating Chloe after eating her birthday cookies," added George, visibly furious. From that moment forward, Brenda was tacitly and officially banned from all future office social activities. It wasn't a formal policy declaration, but an unspoken, collective understanding. No one would invite her to anything, ever again. No one would accept her transparent excuses anymore, and no one would be exploited by her manipulation again. In the following days, it was fascinating to observe how the office dynamic shifted. Colleagues who had been silently victimised by Brenda began sharing their own experiences, now that they felt completely safe to speak out. Rebecca from HR told me that Brenda had borrowed $25 from her 3 months ago for emergency parking validation, and never repaid it. Tom from marketing revealed that she constantly asked for rides to evening events, and never once offered to contribute toward fuel. Hannah mentioned that Brenda had neglected to pay her share of the collective gift for our CEO's birthday. "I always found it peculiar," said Leo during lunch, "but I never wanted to seem petty by complaining about $20 or $30 here and there." "That's the core of her strategy," I replied. "She counted entirely on our politeness and our collective reluctance to create conflicts over small amounts. But when you tallied it all up, it was shocking to realise how pervasive the problem was. Brenda had affected practically every single person on the team in some way, always using the same method. Amounts small enough not to warrant a confrontation, but large enough to accumulate a significant financial benefit for her over time. Max calculated that just in the events he could clearly recall, he had paid over $250 extra, covering Brenda's portion throughout the year. "When you see it written down," he said, "it's terrifying how systematically I was exploited." Chloe confessed that she'd started avoiding social gatherings because she felt intensely uncomfortable with Brenda's behaviour but had no idea how to address the situation. "I thought the problem was just me," she admitted. "I thought perhaps I was being overly sensitive." 3 weeks after the presentation at the bar, Brenda submitted a request for a transfer to another department. Officially, the reason cited was for new professional growth opportunities. In practice, everyone knew she could no longer function effectively in an environment where her toxic behaviour had been completely exposed. The transfer request was swiftly approved. Our manager, Susan, who had been informed of the entire situation through Sarah, seemed relieved to solve the problem without having to resort to formal disciplinary action. On Brenda's final day in our department, she quietly cleared her desk. There was no farewell party, no collective gift, no speeches about, "We'll miss you." She simply gathered her personal items and left. Some people felt uncomfortable with the definitive nature of the ostracism, but the majority agreed that the consequences were entirely appropriate for her actions. As Susan succinctly put it, "Actions have consequences. She created this situation entirely with her own choices." The office environment improved dramatically following Brenda's departure. People returned to organising social events without any fear of being exploited. The Friday happy hour became genuinely enjoyable again, instead of financially stressful. Group lunches flowed naturally, without any drama when it came time to divide the check. More significantly, we had inadvertently established a healthy precedent. Everyone now felt empowered to actively confront exploitative behaviours before they could escalate into major problems. The group had learned that maintaining good manners did not equate to accepting endless exploitation. I became a kind of silent champion for the group, the person who finally possessed the courage to confront a pattern of behaviour that everyone knew was wrong, but no one had effectively challenged. But what made me most proud was knowing I had protected genuinely kind people like Chloe and Max from continuing to be victimised. The most important lesson we all learned was that sometimes the only viable way to deal with individuals who systematically exploit others' good nature is to confront them directly with concrete evidence and real-world consequences. Politeness and patience are valuable virtues, but they must never be allowed to become weaknesses used against us. 6 months after this entire situation concluded, I can confidently say that my life has transformed in ways I never anticipated. Not just because I successfully removed Brenda from my professional life, but because I discovered a version of myself I didn't know existed. For years, I was the person who avoided conflict at all costs. I preferred being taken advantage of rather than creating uncomfortable situations. I mistakenly believed that being polite meant passively accepting whatever others chose to do, even when it was clearly unjust. The Brenda case taught me that there is a fundamental distinction between being genuinely kind and being a doormat. True kindness originates from a place of inner strength and deliberate choice, not from a fear of confrontation. When we permit people to exploit us because of our politeness, we are not being noble. We are being complicit with destructive behaviour. Most critically, I learned that when we fail to confront toxic individuals, we are not just allowing them to hurt us, we are actively allowing them to harm other people too. Chloe did not deserve that public humiliation. Max did not deserve to be financially exploited. And how many other decent people had Brenda affected in previous jobs because no one ever adequately challenged her? In the subsequent months, I continued organising dinners with the E&IK group, but now with a completely different dynamic. People felt free to be authentic, without the constant fear of being exploited. Our events became more frequent and genuinely more enjoyable because everyone knew they were in a safe, respectful environment. Max returned to being the kind, generous person he always was, but now equipped with healthy boundaries. He learned to decline requests when necessary, and no longer felt guilty about protecting his own financial resources and well-being. Chloe absolutely flourished. Without Brenda's constant undermining, she emerged as one of the most creative and collaborative people on the team. She even resumed regularly bringing her culinary creations to the office, knowing they would be genuinely appreciated. Susan, our manager, confessed to me months later that she had noticed Brenda's behaviour, but had no idea how to address it without concrete, documented proof. "You accomplished what I should have done as a leader," she admitted. "You taught me the critical importance of documenting problems and confronting them with direct facts." Most interestingly, our shared experience became a kind of legend within the office. New hires eventually hear the story, always recounted respectfully, focusing on the powerful lessons learned. And this created a workplace culture where exploitative behaviours were quickly identified and shut down. A few months later, I received an unexpected message on LinkedIn. It was from a woman named Jessica, who had worked with Brenda at her previous company. "Hi Eliza, I know this sounds strange, but a mutual friend told me about the situation with Brenda at your office. I wanted to tell you that you did the right thing. She did the exact same things to us for almost a year before finally being transferred. No one ever had the courage to adequately confront her. Thank you for finally doing it." The message confirmed my suspicion that Brenda's behaviour pattern likely spanned years, perhaps even decades. How many co-workers had been victimised? How many genuinely good people had been humiliated and exploited? This gave me a sense of final closure I hadn't expected. It wasn't about seeking revenge or making Brenda suffer for her past actions. It was about decisively interrupting a destructive cycle that had likely affected dozens of people over the years. Ryan, my boyfriend, witnessed the entire transformation firsthand. "You are a different person," he commented one day. "More confident, far more assertive. It's like you finally found your true voice." He was absolutely right. Confronting Brenda had granted me access to a powerful part of myself that I had suppressed for years. The part that knew how to defend justice, that was not afraid of uncomfortable situations when necessary, and that possessed the ability to protect vulnerable people from predators. I began applying these crucial lessons to every other area of my life. At work, I became much more willing to question decisions that lacked sense and propose stronger alternatives. In my personal relationships, I established much clearer boundaries and stopped accepting bothersome behaviour merely to avoid conflict. A year later, I received a promotion to team manager. My boss specifically cited my proven ability to handle challenging social situations in a mature and effective manner as one of the key decision factors. As for Brenda, I eventually learned through casual comments that she attempted the same pattern in her new department, but for a significantly shorter time. People were already aware of her reputation, and when she tried to repeat the familiar behaviours, she was immediately confronted. Eventually, she left the company entirely. I felt no joy in this news, nor any satisfaction from revenge. In fact, I felt a genuine sadness for a person who had chosen to construct a life based on exploiting others instead of developing genuine skills in relationships and contribution. But I also felt immense pride in having contributed to creating a workplace environment where people like Chloe and Max could thrive without the fear of being victimised, where true kindness was both valued and fiercely protected, not exploited. Today, when I organise social events, I am always mindful of group dynamics and subtle behaviours that might signal exploitation or manipulation. Not in a paranoid way, but in a protective, watchful manner. I learned that creating and maintaining healthy environments is an active effort, not something that simply happens by chance. I also became an informal mentor for people struggling with similar situations. Several times, colleagues from other departments have approached me for advice on how to deal with manipulative or exploitative people on their own teams. My counsel is consistently the same. Document absolutely everything. Gather concrete evidence and confront with irrefutable facts, not raw emotion. But most importantly, remember that protecting your own dignity and the dignity of others is not an act of cruelty. It is a fundamental responsibility. The story with Brenda taught me that there is a profound difference between people who make occasional mistakes and individuals who systematically exploit others. We all occasionally forget a wallet or face temporary financial difficulties. But when there is a consistent non-stop pattern, combined with a lifestyle that fundamentally contradicts any claim of hardship, you are dealing with something far more serious. And Eliza, well, I continued organising successful dinners with the group, but now I knew exactly how to identify and effectively deal with freeloaders before they could cause any lasting damage to the group. More significantly, I learned that sometimes the kindest, most ethical thing you can do is actively shield good people from those who intend to harm them. The most invaluable lesson from all this was discovering that you can be a fundamentally kind and good person without ever being a doormat. That establishing clear, healthy boundaries does not make you petty or cruel. It makes you responsible. And that protecting your own dignity and the dignity of others is not optional when you are genuinely committed to creating a better world around you. Today, when I observe similar situations unfolding, I do not hesitate to intervene. Not aggressively or vindictively, but firmly and solely based on the facts. Because I learned that silence in the face of exploitation is not a virtue. It is complicity. And that is my story about how an apparently ordinary person discovered they possessed the inner strength to confront an experienced manipulator and protect an entire group of genuinely good, kind people. It was never about revenge or humiliation. It was about dignity, mutual respect, and the necessary courage to do the right thing, even when it is highly uncomfortable. And that was the story of how Eliza discovered that being kind does not mean being a doormat, and that sometimes protecting good people requires the courage to firmly confront toxic behaviours. What did you think of Eliza's final actions? Did she go too far, or did she do exactly what was necessary to be done? Please share your opinion in the comments and tell me, have you ever been through a similar situation? Have you ever had to deal with that person who always just forgets their wallet when the bill arrives? How did you personally react? If you found this story compelling and want to see more content about toxic relationships, emotional manipulation, and how to establish clear, healthy boundaries, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Next week, we are going to talk about red flags in friendships and how to identify people who only show up when they desperately need something from you. Don't miss it. And remember, you inherently deserve to be surrounded by people who respect and value you. Never, ever accept less than that. Until next time, and thank you for watching.